Thank you for listening to this worship podcast of St. Andrew Lutheran Church. I am Peter Johnson, Interim Senior Pastor. We hope this recording provides you with a moment of God's grace wherever this finds you. Know that you're welcome to join us in person for worship in Eden Prairie on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. And also know that any contribution you make will bolster St. Andrew's ministry and outreach, including our podcasting directly to you. You can do so online. Welcome and God's blessings to you.
A reading from the 24th chapter of Luke. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead, as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The word of the Lord. You may be seated.
It was all just a little bit too much for Cleopas and his companion to understand as they walked from Jerusalem to Emmaus. An amazing ministry had taken place around them that they had been witnesses to. There were miracles, there were words of comfort and peace, there were actions that were coming from this person named Jesus that could only have come from God. And here they are making their way from the city of Jerusalem with all of their expectations dashed. Jesus has been crucified and was buried. The story had been told to them, as we hear in the reading that Pastor Sue read for us, that he was meant to be gone, meant to be raised, no longer there, but it still was far more than they could realize. So they left Jerusalem, making their way to Emmaus, trying to sort everything out. On the one hand, they knew where they were going, to this village called Emmaus, but of course, figuratively, part of the irony is that they had no idea where they were going. They were lost. They were discouraged. There was disappointed tone in their voices. They felt isolated. Maybe they even felt dismissed. The world did not have the same hope in it than they once had. They said, "We thought that he would be the one to redeem Israel," and I guess not. They weren't exactly rising strong, weren't they? Our sermon series after Easter. But the thing about Easter time that we will continue to preach during Easter and far beyond is just when you think you have seen it all, just when you think the story is over and we're on that discouraged, disappointed, and lonely walk of life, just when you think, there's a companion that comes alongside them and does some explaining. Not just in words, but a companion who comes in presence. And then later, over a meal at the end of a day's journey, over the breaking of bread and the passing of a cup, they realize that it was Jesus himself who had been with them the whole time, unlocking for them, dispelling for them, giving them a sense of hope and peace after all. And there is this great phrase that's been used many times within the Christian world ever since, that this hearts were burning within them, or there was something within them that turned them over, that made them feel like things were going to be okay. There were words of encouragement in the presence of God, a new understanding that the hearts were burning within them, or turned afire. And I think for those of us living life and in our own circumstances, there are times perhaps where we have found ourselves walking along that road, wondering what in the world is our Easter God up to in the circumstances that are part of our world. If we look out long ways away to parts of Eastern Europe or the Middle East, if we stay close to home and wonder the circumstances in our own neighborhoods, even in our own families, where are you, God? We can't see or know you in our current state of affairs. To Cleopas and his companion, and for those of us who gather here in this place as people of faith, we believe that somehow, some way, and always, God steps back into our lives to give us even a little dose of joy again, a little dose of peace again, to rekindle hope within our hearts, that maybe our hearts could be alight again in what opportunities might be. And so part of this passage in Luke 24 for all of us today is to remain vigilant as the people of God, to be open-minded and receptive to the presence of God in our world and in our lives. To be open-minded and receptive, to be expectant, to tune our dials to hear something new. And I know that's going to date me because I used to, as a young man, tune the radio dial. For those of you who are old like me, know what I'm talking about. But we need to tune our dials expectantly for what is to come and be on the lookout for a message and a word of encouragement for us. This is what Cleopas and his companion received from God. This is the Easter promise that we still need to have for us. And so this morning I want to talk about some of these small influencers, the small influencers in life that come alongside us, that nudge us toward goodness, that interrupts us, that reminds us of the presence of God's goodness in our lives, that makes its way, wiggles its way. Sometimes we don't want it to come in, but it does come in, but it touches us with a moment of grace These are these small influencers. As a gentleman who is an influencer on social media and books named Richard Grant, dealing with the death of a spouse, he talks about a pocket full of happiness. Every day, his dying spouse, before she died, told him, Richard Grant, find a pocket full of happiness every day, because everything else is not going to be easy, but there'll be one pocket full of grace every day. This is the interruption. Be open-minded and be receptive to that which is on the way. So I have a few examples from life. Back about 6 weeks ago or so, I remember listening to the radio to a story that was playing. And it was the buildup for the lunar eclipse that we were all anticipating. Not so much here in Minnesota, because the eclipse was not crossing our part of the country, but you were caught up in it just as much as I was. But there was an article in a story about a restaurant that was situated in not the totality of the eclipse, but they were positioned in the 99.6% of the eclipse. And this article was talking about how this restaurant was trying to decide if they were going to hold or host a party with 99.6% of the eclipse happening above them, or if people, their patrons, would actually drive the 20 minutes down the road so they could be at the place where the eclipse was 100%. So they hemmed and hawed about it, all the fun of figuring out what do we do about the eclipse that's happening. They ultimately decided to hold a party, even if it was only 99.6% eclipse. Now, for me as a Lutheran pastor, and for me as someone who sees and hears things coming at me, I reserve these thoughts. They get reserved back in my brain somewhere for a future sermon, such as today. Because I always perk up when I hear someone say on the radio, even if it's about an eclipse, the words that 99.6% is not good enough. You know what I mean by that? I don't think about it as an eclipse. I get it. If I were 20 minutes away from a total, I would go to totality for sure. But I interpret this even more broadly in terms of life and faith and God's promises to us as God's people. And I say to myself, when I hear someone say 99.6% is not good enough, I get a little bit out of sorts with a phrase kind of like that. And the work that I do and the conversations that I have and the people that are part of this beautiful church at St. Andrew, where we live by grace, not by works, where we're authentic to ourselves and our understandings, we do not assign percentages of perfection to lots of things in life. And one of the things that I think about as a preaching pastor now too is how often we assign 100% perfection to things that we do. And absolutely there are things that we need to assign 100% of success rates. I mean, if you're designing a bridge, you'd better get the bridge construction right for engineers. If you're in cybersecurity, like my oldest son is involved, you better stop 100% of the malware that's trying to get into that company's database, right? But there are lots of other things that we assign this 100% perspective to that don't need to be assigned 100% correct. And I think there's wisdom in our being able to distinguish and tell the difference of when we don't need to put 100% as a disclaimer on something and on everything, or the things that we ought not to do. Michelle and I had a conversation with some old friends of ours for many years, and their twins are graduating from college. One is going this way, one is going that way. They're both awesome. But if you set 100% expectations that the life is going to be like this or life is going to be like that, then someone's not going to make them. Meanwhile, they're just living into who they are becoming, whatever path that is going to be. So assigning the expectations and expecting 100% compliance and making yourself forward is an invitation, though, sometimes for us to step off the high course. And I think also let God be God for all of us. Is 99.6% good enough for God? Is 5% good enough for God? If we in the Lutheran Church are asked to take our expectations off what we do and instead let ourselves pay attention to what Jesus did for us, then we don't think in percentages anymore. We think in joy and in gratitude. No more percentages. The gospel of God, the gospel of Jesus Christ is wholeness. That with God, I'm 100%. Thanks be to God for that. So an article like this, for me as a preacher, this is one of those influencers that comes across my radar when I hear someone say 99.6% is not good enough. My heart of faith says, in a lot of things, it's totally good enough. If God loves and cares for us the way God loves, cares, and forgives us when we need to be forgiven. Another small influencer in life, those things that engage with us, happens to be something that I do each week here at St. Andrew Lutheran Church, and it's being a part of the Early Risers book study and Bible study on Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. We could always take more people who can join in that group. We enjoy our conversations, and every week I just get a little morsel. Sometimes I get a big morsel, but some weeks it's just a little morsel of what it means to be faithful and hopeful from these faithful people that attend at 8 a.m. on Wednesday mornings. This past week we were talking about the book of Acts, and about really the book of Acts is kind of about only the book of the Acts of Peter and of Paul. You know, so if you've studied at all the book of Acts, these are the two big names, right, in the Bible and in the latter part of the New Testament after Jesus. But this whole chapter was about all the lesser-known people, the smaller people, the smaller influencers in the book of Acts that exist there. There are people like Rhoda, who I have an aunt Rhoda. She was a slave girl. There are just 3 verses about Rhoda in the book of Acts. But she proclaimed Jesus as a slave to this early Christian community. There's Tabitha and Dorcas, whose name was both in Greek and in Aramaic, and she was seen as a bridge builder between the two cultures and communities. Just a few verses about Tabitha Dorcas, her name that is two names. There are other people like Stephen the martyr. There are other people like Barnabas. Many strong women we talked about at Early Risers on Wednesday morning. What this got me thinking about, and all of us thinking about, are these smaller influential people in our lives of our past that have helped us see a glimmer of hope and of love and of belonging. Those people who have turned our hearts over at times. And it isn't necessarily the Peters and the Pauls, like the pastors who get up in front of you on a Sunday morning and deliver a sermon, necessarily, the ones who are try to be as polished as they can be, in other words. But oftentimes, it's those small, influential people there who are part of your lives, who have come alongside you and encouraged you. I think back to Fargo, to Nina, I think back to Virginia, to Joel and Carol, back when I was in middle school and high school, and Dale, and I think about Dana and Ed and Nancy Courier, and lots of people that just made me feel like I was at home, or they had little phrases here and there that would give me a blessing and show me a way forward that was new and different. And I wonder who those people are for you. As Cleopas and this companion make their way, Jesus appears to them. They don't know where they're going because they're lost. But Jesus reminds them that they're part of something far greater. And I think there are lots of people, at least I hope there are people in our lives who have done just that. These smaller influencers in life that help us move forward. Who are they? And Who are you to others? Is the other way to put it as well. How do we come alongside others and give them a sense of hope and a sense of love, a presence, and so forth? And finally, another small influencer today is something that I would like for each of you as homework to participate in today. I was looking at the weather report today, and at 4 p.m., it's going to be sunny and the temperature is going to hit 60 degrees. Yes, one more time. I like to think that the people here and listening online at 4 p.m. today will all take 15 minutes to go outside. And I don't want you to look at all the things that you have to do in your yard, because I sure have a lot of things that I need to do in my yard. But for 15 minutes, I want you to suspend all those to-do items and enjoy the reemergence of God's creation. Just yesterday, Michelle shouted out from the kitchen, "I see a cardinal." But if you were to turn off all the other little things, if you're able to, and go outside and just look at a branch for 5 minutes, or see where the hosta is starting to emerge by our back patio, and see how, man, I didn't think it would make it. Or I look at our ash tree that we've been treating, with emerald ash borer, chemicals, and which branches are going to be there, which aren't, the drill. I'm going to look up at our big tree and see where the buds of life are starting to emerge. And maybe at 4 o'clock today, if all of us went outside and said, where is God at work here? Where is this little simple example of how the creation that God has ordained could bless us anew today? Maybe we need to set our alarms and go out at 4 o'clock here today. So finally, friends, what I love about Luke 24 here is these two people, Cleopas and this companion, that are on the road. And we don't know the companion's name. And I sometimes wonder, why did this person get historically lost in the writing of the gospel? We know Cleopas, but the other one is just a companion, like Cleopas was not alone. But there are times when I wonder sometimes if there isn't just a little wink or a little bit of a nod that the gospel writer is giving to us faithful readers and faithful followers to insert name here. To put our name into the readings. That in life and faith, as we live and grow, as we walk those roads of disappointment and wonder, or what? Where are you, God? That there's also a chance for us with all of these small influences, with a nod and a wink and a little bit of a smile, an invitation to add your name to the narrative. As a follower, as one who sees the good things that God is doing in the Easter resurrection over and over again. It's our time to see goodness and mercy again. My time and your time. This is Easter. Thanks be to God. Amen. Thank you for listening to this worship podcast of St. Andrew Lutheran Church. We hope that this recording provides you with a moment of God's grace wherever this finds you. Any contribution you make to St. Andrew will bolster our ministry and outreach, including our podcasting directly to you. You can do so online. Thank you for joining us for this podcast, and I wish you every blessing from Christ today.